And welcome back, everyone. My name's Nick Lamparelli. Back to the AI conversation that I think invariably we're going to be having for years to come. I would like to introduce Stefan Heck, founder and CEO of Nauto. Stefan, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me.
Love the AI conversation. I'm looking forward to learning about Nauto and how you're using AI because after perusing your website, it seems as though it actually has a significant. This isn't just plug some text into a chatbot and get some clean text back out. There actually appears to be some significant societal benefit to the type of AI that you're doing. So I'm going to start right in and ask you, Stefan. We want to give everybody a little bit of an opportunity to introduce themselves with an elevator pitch. Stefan, tell us a little bit more about you. Tell us a little bit more about Nauto.
Yeah, I'll start with my own background. It's an unusual mix. I did a PhD in neural networks 30 years ago when that was still a really obscure field and there were really no applications to speak of. Of course, that has all changed with deep learning becoming embedded in so many ordinary devices, from phones to robots, vacuum cleaners, and now
Mm-hmm.
also automobiles, of course. Um, And then I spent about 2 decades working with multinational companies all over the world at McKinsey, running different practices, internet, semiconductors, clean tech, industrial practice. So really getting to know, what do people do in the industries that build things, move things, transport things. And those two, you'll see in a moment, converged in why Nauto became something I wanted to spend time on. But I'm hugely
Excellent.
passionate about AI, but in ethical applications and deployments. If you look today, a lot of time and effort and money in AI goes to things that I don't think are necessarily, great for the world. And I don't mean evil. Obviously, if you do weapons or things like that, you could very quickly get into things that are very destructive. But a lot of AI is being applied to basically do paperwork and paper pushing. Reading
Mm-hmm.
contracts, scanning documents, which is perfectly fine. Productivity improvements in paperwork processing aren't bad, but they're not exactly changing the world. So when I started, I was really looking for an application for new technologies that would make a difference. And what Nauto is, in elevator pitch form, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
is a co-pilot for drivers that is basically helping in real time as you're driving to look 4 or 5 seconds into the future, understand what's going on, understand what might be risky, and also understand what you're already aware of versus not. Because if you've seen the stop sign coming up, you see the pedestrian crossing, we're all good drivers normally when we're paying attention. We know what to do. And you don't need a nanny in the car that says, there's a pedestrian. Um, However, if you're falling asleep or you're distracted momentarily, or worst case, you're looking down at your phone, or in a commercial vehicle, often people are looking at paperwork or looking at where their next site is that they've got to go to. These kinds of moments where there's something happening outside and you're not paying attention are really, really dangerous. And so that's where the co-pilot comes in, surfacing high risk moments where there's some combination of circumstances that is not just a little bit risky, but we see many situations are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times riskier than normal driving. That's where we want to intervene with warnings, with coaching, with feedback, with a heads up. In plain language, I describe it as, we want to give you a heads up if you're going to go, oh shit, because those are the moments where you're grateful that somebody called your attention. And, that's like a good friend in the car that says, hey, Nick, watch out.
Wake up.
Yeah.
Um, I am curious as to Google's AI because on my YouTube feed, I get fed those high risk accidents. Like when you describe those, like I've seen so many of those. So many are getting caught on video camera now. Not always the driver's fault, right? Like just so many bad drivers who cut in front of
Oh, yeah.
18 wheelers, people who challenge 18 wheelers, like get that road rage and they're like literally challenging it. And it I I would have thought it was a big problem, but then my YouTube feed tells me it's actually like a really serious and big problem.
It is serious. And I don't recommend anybody challenging an 18 wheeler.
Mm.
What we see actually is interesting, even though people don't like being next to a big truck. Commercial drivers, whether they're driving 18-wheelers or they're driving delivery vans or pickup trucks, we see a lot of commercial drivers, making service calls in pickup trucks or vans. They are generally actually really good drivers. They're better than consumer drivers.
Yeah.
But they drive a lot of hours, they drive a lot of miles. And so, yes, things will happen, whether it's through the occasional mistake they make or other people accidentally or deliberately getting in their way. We do see that with the improvement we can help the drivers make in a commercial fleet, they wind up being about 4 to 5 times better than where they started. And so the vast majority of the situations they get into are now other people's fault. And so, to your point, that exoneration becomes a really important part,
Yeah.
even if
And
it's not a deliberate act, right? People run
yeah.
stop signs or red lights accidentally, mostly, not because they're trying to run them.
And of course, this is an insurance related podcast. So risk and indemnification of risk become extremely important. And also identification of whose party is at fault becomes incredibly important from an insurance standpoint. And before we jump into the specific insurance applications for this, obviously, if I ask you the question like why now, I almost feel stupid asking that, like why now with AI. But you got your PhD a long time ago, and the AI has artificial intelligence has been promoted and talked about for decades, and I've begun to follow like a little bit of the history of it and like what it took from a computing power standpoint to kind of get us to this point. So my question's not now, but what made you go McKinsey to Nauto? Why did you make that leap? Were you sufficiently satisfied that enough of the pieces were in place? Were there pieces missing? How did you gauge the risk of, clearly it's a societal beneficial problem, but there's been a whole bunch of those that like, yeah, it's great for society, but the technology was not quite there. What made you decide at that point? Because looks like you started it before the rage and the craze at the beginning of this
For
year.
the AI hype. Yes, that's right. Well, so I've been in AI for over 30 years, and there have been several up and down cycles, right? When I was in college, expert systems were the rage, and nobody talks about expert systems anymore now. And then, voice recognition was the rage 10, 15 years ago, and we sort of take that for granted now with Siri and Google all around us. So it's become ordinary. Most people don't even think about that as AI anymore. They just think it's a voice, response. Um, so why now, and why this technology? I started not almost 10 years ago now, and a couple things converged. One is what you're talking about, which is the compute capacity to actually really do significant amounts of neural compute, deep learning compute in a vehicle in real time. And that's critical because telling you something bad happened yesterday is not so helpful, right? You got to do it right now. And in fact, in a vehicle, as I said, we look about 4 or 5 seconds into the future, and then you have about half a second to tell the driver or to do something about it, right? You don't have a lot of time. And so any of the systems, the traditional systems that load data to the cloud and then something happens in the cloud and then it comes back, this just doesn't work for driving. It has to be real time. The reason I thought this was game changing was you could not only detect individual risk factors, there's a stop sign, there's a pedestrian, there's a dog crossing the street, whatever, but you could also actually assess the situation as a whole. Because as I described a moment ago, if the driver sees a risk factor and is already adjusting for it, the stop sign's coming, they've taken their foot off the gas and they're starting to slow down, those situations are ordinary. There's nothing dangerous in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the moment where two or three things come together that cause collisions, and usually it's more than one mistake. If you read the NTSB reports on airplane crashes,
Mm-hmm.
planes don't crash because of one thing. It's like a chain of bad luck and
Mm-hmm.
5, 6, 7 things going wrong that causes a plane crash. And collisions are the same way. In fact, we see if one driver in one vehicle makes some serious mistakes, like let's say run a red light, if the other driver is paying attention, even though they may have the right of way, they may have the green light, they can avoid that collision, right? They can see, oh, the guy's not looking, he's running the red light. I'm just going to slow down or swerve or get out of the way. And so it's a powerful thing to make sure that at least one of the drivers is aware of the risks to be able to avoid them. The now part is interesting because I did some very basic statistical calculations on how frequently different kinds of collisions happen and why. And I became convinced, this is back in 2014, that autonomous driving, which was then just sort of taking off, VCs were investing in it, universities were funding it, would take much longer to get to full deployment than people thought. And the insight is really very simple. If you look at what's considered high reliability, an airplane is 5 nines of reliability. So 99.999%, some systems are even 7 nines, 2 more nines, of the situations have to be handled safely. And I thought that was a bit of a high bar. We've been working on airplanes for 100 years. So let's just say we need to get to 3 nines, 99.9% reliable. You wouldn't want to get into a car that crashes more often than 1 in 1,000 trips. And if you do the math, how many different kinds of risks you need to have seen? The answer is shockingly big. You need to have driven about 200 billion miles. There's a lot of miles. None of us drive that much in our lifetime. Now we all learn from expert drivers, whether it's our parents or driving tutors. But AI systems need to bootstrap from data, so they need a lot of data. That's the reason why I felt, wow, we could make, and this is actually the ethical motivation, we could use AI to help drivers get better, much safer, much faster, without any of the errors along the way, without any of the deployment restrictions that AVs have, and without injuring people along the way and making mistakes, by just deploying it to help human drivers and also the other direction, to learn from human drivers. We have 6 drivers in one of our customers that have driven for 43 years without ever causing a collision. That's way out there in terms of driving performance, right? Nobody drives for 40 years without having a collision. But there are individuals who are that good. And so you definitely want to learn, what are they looking at? What are they doing? How are they driving? Because that's the kind of autonomous vehicle you want to get into 10 years from now.
Completely. I want to joke and say how slow they're driving, but as I know, slowness can actually cause collision as well,
Yeah.
because especially where I live in Florida, where you have maniacs on the highway, going 90 on the highway, or even like one of the main roads, so like thinking it's a highway. And so going slow doesn't help you.
So it's all context dependent. It's actually one of the dilemmas for autonomous vehicles. If you look at most highways, not just Florida, people generally go a little above the speed limit. And it turns out
A little.
it varies. California, it's 10,
seem
15
that
miles
way.
above the speed limit. So it's pretty high here, not just a little. But I've driven into Jersey. They tend to be a little stricter than California. Anyway, to your point, the safest speed is to get right in there with the flow of traffic. So if everybody else is speeding 10 miles per hour, you should speed 10 miles per hour too. It's not legal advice, of course. It's just practical advice, rule of thumb. Because if you go slower than everybody else, guess what happens? They all cut around you, they honk at you, and those cut-in maneuvers and overtaking maneuvers are far more dangerous than the extra 10 mile per hour speed. But here's the dilemma for an autonomous vehicle. The autonomous vehicle has to be programmed. So some engineer at GM or Ford or Stellantis or whatever needs to sit there and say, I'm going to program you to speed by 10 miles per hour. Well, you can imagine that's not an easy thing for the lawyers to approve, even though it would be the right thing to do from a safety point of view.
Yes. So can you discuss like how Nauto works? 'Cause it's in order to be 4 or 5 seconds ahead, sounds like and not have it cloud-based as well. Like you need almost like computing power in the vehicle, and you need lots of cameras, right?
That's
Like
right.
you need to be scanning and looking all over the place, because it's the Terminator, right? Like it's doing all of those calculations in real time. So is Nauto an AI company? Is it a hardware company? Are you building like what? Talk about
Yeah.
like how that all sort of rolls out to an actual solution.
Yeah, I don't love the Terminator metaphor. We're trying to keep you alive, not terminate.
Well, the
So
good Terminator, Terminator
the good
3.
Terminator. Okay, the good Terminator. That's right. The second Arnold. Um, yeah. So what we do is we use computer vision. So we do use image sensors, and I think there's an important distinction that I'll come back to because I think it's something that a lot of people don't see in the full nuance. Image sensors can be used to record videos, and that's where people get into privacy concerns. Are you watching me? Who gets to see that video, right? Image sensors can also be used to process data in real time, just like systems that fly airplanes process data in real time. And there's a separate black box that records what happens. And so we're using the image sensors to understand what's happening. We detect different kinds of objects. We what's called classify them. So you are categorizing what kind of object is this. So it'll say, oh, there's a sign here. What kind of sign is it? It's a stop sign. Oh, there's a vehicle here. Is it a bicycle? Is it a motorcycle? Is it a truck? Because they all behave differently. We also apply computer vision on the inside of the vehicle to understand what's the driver looking at. Are they awake? What are their eyes pointed at? Are their hands on the wheels, or is one hand eating a sandwich or smoking? Because those are all going to impact how quickly you can respond to what's going on. And then, really important, it's all happening in the vehicle in real time. So we do retrofit not only the sensors, but a significant amount of compute. It all sits on your windshield in a small box. And it is observing your environment. It's observing what actions the driver's taking. And it also knows about the history of that location and what's happened there before and what the typical road conditions are. And how, is it a highly curved road or is it a very straight road? And it's putting all that together 10 times a second and basically determining, is this situation normal, uninteresting? Is this situation unusual, but fine, not risky? That can happen, right? You might have a sudden traffic jam, but everybody's adjusting. Or is the situation unusual in a bad way, where we've seen other examples like this have led to collisions? And as I said, we learn from human drivers. So we look at the situation and the actions of the human and say, okay, this combination, something's happening out front, but the human's braking, that's fine. That's a good reaction, right? But something's happening in front of you and you're texting on your phone, that's a bad combination. And unless we intervene, that's going to lead to a bad outcome. Our interventions, the design goal is really to be very sparse. We want to intervene only in the most critical situations. So, for example, if you're stopped at a red light and you start taking out your phone and looking at your email, it's illegal in 2/3 of the states, but we won't intervene. We're not here to be the cop. We're not here to be law enforcement. We're really here just to keep you safe. And texting while you're stopped at a red light isn't zero risk, but it's very low risk. The risk that you run is that the person coming up behind you looks at the light change to green and keeps going and then rear ends you, which, to your point about insurance claims, wouldn't even be your fault. It'd be their fault.
Yeah.
But still, you don't want to get into that
Yeah.
collision if you
Yeah.
can avoid it. Compare that to texting at 75 miles per hour when you're coming up at a traffic jam. That's suicidal. And so we, in those situations, we sound alarms. There's some graduated interventions in between. For example, the longer you get distracted, the more serious the risk becomes. By the time you reach 6 seconds of distraction, you've got a whole football field without looking at the road. And that turns out to be 23 times riskier than normal driving. So that's where you want to start saying, hey, get your eyes back on the road and pay attention. And we do that through voice. So we'll say, pull over to use your phone, or put your eyes back on the road, or leave more following distance. But the idea is it's only a couple times a day for a commercial driver. So you might be driving 8 hours a day. You might get 3 items of coaching and feedback. And it turns out that can make you 80% better in terms of your risk factors and your driving quality in about 3 days. And so that's what we do. It's all real time in the vehicle. And this is the important point I wanted to come back to. For us, whether or not you want to capture a video of any event is completely optional. So you can set Nauto to record only collisions, because as we discussed earlier, it's beautiful. You can have proof that it was not your fault and exonerate yourself. You can set Nauto to only capture moments where the driver says, I want to capture this. So we have a little button that basically the driver can initiate and say, I was cut off, I was threatened, I was scared, I want to have proof. Or you can capture, high risk events for coaching. So you can use them after the drive and say, I want to look at the situation and learn from it. Even if you do the last one, which uploads more data, we're typically seeing that only captures less than 0.5% of all your driving. So you're really driving with complete privacy, and nobody's watching. We don't allow supervisors to drop in on the vehicle and see what's going on. Yeah. And the only thing that will go to your insurance company is actual data about your collisions. And again, mostly that's being used to exonerate the driver, because in our case, fleet drivers, they get really, really good. So the vast majority of events they get into are other people's fault.
Please tell me that the voice is like in an Arnold Schwarzenegger voice that says pull over. That would be awesome.
We debated that for a long time 6 years ago. And we've chosen actually really respected female voices that are specifically designed. We worked with an audio design firm and voice talent, so that they're strict but friendly and encouraging, and they're positive. So they tell you the thing you should do, right? They don't say, hey, speeding. They say, slow down or leave more following distance. But the alternatives we debated, and you'll like this, is, who are you going to listen to most, right? Is it your favorite actor? So it could be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is it actually your mother? Do you really want your mother in the car with you? Or is it your child? Your child saying, hey, dad, slow down, right? And somebody you care about.
Yes. That would be
And
very
it turns out
interesting.
people have different preferences. There are some people who would rather have a drill sergeant. There's somebody who want that Zen yoga instructor. So it's fascinating.
My mom's a Italian immigrant, so you can imagine that accent and what that
Yeah.
would sound like. Her instead of calling me Nick, calling me Nikki, and I would
Yeah.
immediately pull over because it's like, oh, I don't want to get punished. That's fantastic. How do these technologies handle inclement weather?
Yeah, so actually quite well. We operate just as well at night. We operate just as well in the rain. Our sensor package is placed at the top of the windshield, still in the area that the windshield wiper covers. So the rule of thumb I always say is if the human driver can still see, our system's fine. Now I've seen situations. We had sandstorms in the Middle East. I've seen some typhoons in Japan, where it's sheer water running down your windshield, and it is ultimately a computer vision technology. It's not magic. So if you can't see through the windshield, then our
Yeah.
technology can't see either.
I was thinking of northeast snowstorms where it's just like I don't even know if I'm in my lane. I can see, but the road is covered. I don't even know. Like we're all just driving, but I don't know if any one of us is actually in the appropriate lane.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. The lanes disappear. Even road signs can get completely covered in snow
Yeah.
and disappear. The good news is generally the biggest risks are other vehicles and people, and those you can still see even in the snow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So again,
but things like
Arnold
black
telling you
ice
to
that are under the
Arnold telling
snow.
you to slow down.
Yeah, that's right.
So clearly, I think this isn't one of those technologies where you have to kind of deduce if there's an insurance application. It's almost like as soon as you start looking at Nauto, it's like, of course there is. And so I'm curious as to I've been engaged in the insurance industry around IoT sensors for property, and been frankly disappointed in the take up, right? Like, because they're always have to juggle, what do we do? Who owns them? Who's going to invest in them? Who owns the data? What about the privacy? We don't know how to price it. And it almost like inevitably creating the obstacle to not engage with the technology. What has been your relationship around this? Because it seems so obvious, but in my experience with insurance, that doesn't mean anything.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I hope there's some insurance executives listening to this podcast and taking notice. I will tell you, insurance has been slow to really think through these technology possibilities. And ironic for an industry that is so astute about risk and takes risk for other people, they're not really willing to take technology risk and innovation risk the same way that a tech company in Silicon
Yeah.
Valley does. So our biggest success in deployments have actually been with large enterprise fleets, the kind of Fortune 100 companies that are either in the food business or service business or buildings, infrastructure, or trucking, transportation, package delivery. Those companies under U.S. insurance regulations are mostly self-insured, so they don't work with a third-party insurance company. The thing that's beautiful in terms of our collaboration with them is the relationship is very simple. They buy the technology often together with their vehicle. You can actually order Nauto directly through Ram, directly through GM, and it comes with your vehicle already. Makes it super easy. And then they use it, and the drivers benefit from the protection, and it reduces their collision rate generally by about 2/3. We see about 65% reduction. And all of those avoided collisions, because they're self-insured, is dropped straight to the bottom line. So the return on investment is super simple. Usually you cover your cost of putting Nauto in or adding Nauto to your vehicle in about 4 or 5 months. It's incredible payback. It's really a no-brainer. It gets more complicated if you're talking about smaller businesses or consumers, where you're paying a premium to an insurer, and really after that you're on the hook only for your deductible. And so we may help you avoid a collision, but that will only save you your $100, $200, $500 deductible.
Yeah.
All right. So it does need, as you alluded to, the insurer needs to come to the table. Now we have some great relationships with insurers, Aviva in the UK, the Hartfords in the US, where they are creating incentives, either in the form of premium discounts or they're actually paying for an auto to be deployed in your vehicle. And that's a great program because now the fleet doesn't have to pay more. The fleet gets the benefit. The insurer also gets a lot of benefit because they save on the claims that never happen. But the real answer and where we'd like to see this go is that this just becomes part of your insurance. So when you go to an insurance company and say, I want to insure my vehicle, the insurer says, great. Do you already have a safety device in your car? No? Okay, then we want you to add this, and it's free. So that's where I think it should go. But as you said, insurance companies are very reluctant to bet on a new technology, invest in a piece of hardware. A lot of their attention right now is on what can I do with a mobile phone app? And the reality is there's only so much you can do with mobile phone apps. You actually need real sensors that tell you what's going on.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think it's a wasted opportunity because let's take your particular example around it comes with the insurance. I think there's a first mover advantage. It's not often in insurance where there is a first mover advantage. As a matter of fact, Brian Falchuk and I talk about this all the time around insurance strategy. For decades, the first mover is probably taking an unusual amount of risk, trying to figure out losses and how much do we charge for this thing. It's usually the fast follower that benefits from this. And in this new paradigm with technology so rapidly evolving, I think the paradigm has changed where now insurers can absolutely benefit first mover because you can, the way that I explain IoT and property is your losses aren't going to get worse. So we have a baseline there. Then it's not like we install these sensors and things go off the rails. The expectation is that it's going to improve. We just don't know by how much. Like that, if I were quantifying this from an underwriting standpoint, it's going to improve. I just don't know by how much. It's at least break even, right? But the missed opportunity is the marketing. The missed opportunity is that I tell this story, Stefan, about the first time I engaged with a water detection puck. And I didn't know if the thing was working because I would just get text messages that would tell me no humidity detected. So one day I went over and I'm like, does this thing even work? Right? Like, how do I know how do I know this thing is just like on the is glitching, is just telling me there's no humidity? So I licked the sensor. And 2 minutes later, I got a text message and the light bulb went off in my head that said, wow, if it was the insurance company that was somehow linked to that text, I am now linking this feeling of this thing works, it's protecting my home in some fashion. There's an emotion to that that now I can link to the insurance company. It's like that's what the insurance companies are missing, is that particular opportunity. There's so few of those that they get to create a particular relationship, emotional relationship with their customer, other than the annoying one of sending the bill and
Yeah.
declining the claim or fighting them on the claim. I feel like it's that missed opportunity. And I'm curious as to, you mentioned Fortune 100, where it is. I was going to bring up the captive insurer solution, but wouldn't your technology then also open up the firms that are just underneath that as well? Like they
Yep.
may not have been the economics may not have been right for a captive, but in this day and age with premium expenses and stuff, now it does open up. The economics do work, and with the payback period you're discussing, now there are potentially hundreds or thousands of corporations with fleets that could look at this and say, we absolutely have to have that now. It's an investment in that regard, but it's also going to drop to the bottom line that because we can self-insure this stuff.
Absolutely right. And, we see a lot of people who have higher self-retention get interested for the reasons you described. We're also in Japan, and the Japanese acceptance of new technology generally is higher. People are more eager to try out new tech. And so you see that most fleets protect their employees with some kind of safety system
Hmm.
already. And so the market penetration is higher. Um, we also see that in our fleets, to your point about the emotional experience, it is a powerful emotional feeling when you avoid a collision and you have one of those oh shit moments where you see,
Yeah, that.
um,
Woo,
you know, and we
your
literally see
heart your
that
heart's pounding in your chest.
we see the heart pounding. We see people actually wave. We see people smile. There's nobody in the device, but they're actually waving to the device. So um,
They do the sports. I just hit a home run cross home plate. I'm going to point to the sky.
yes,
Thank God.
yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. And what a contrast to, we obviously capture collisions too. Collisions usually result in some kind of four-letter word because they're angry, they're upset, sometimes with themselves for how stupid that was. And so there is a strong emotional feeling when you get your life is saved by an alert or a warning or something protecting you.
Yeah, that's and to me, it's as I think about how this goes to broadcast, I think that's an important message for anyone that's in the commercial auto space. Is we get so few opportunities to that moment, and to have it's one thing to make someone whole, it's another to save their life, it's another
Yep.
to have them avoid something. That's an emotional response that um insurers, I don't think have. I can't think of an insurance that isn't like some sort of post event follow through. They never get that marketing opportunity, they never get that potential emotional link. And I'm going to think even a little bit deeper because you're the way you frame that, and as I start to kind of empathize with that, it's man, it's a deep connection. It's almost like even if your premiums go up, they're not going to want to fire you because you're the thing that saved their life, right? Like there's that kind of emotional connection which you would never have the possibility of creating in any traditional way with an insurance product. that fundamentally changes what insurance is in someone's life or business or whatever. It's that power of that emotion that I think Nauto can potentially create.
Absolutely. And imagine a future insurance model where it, the safety system's free, your insurance company's protecting you. You get a with your renewal, you get a report that says, Nick, we saved your life 4 times last year. And we're delighted to retain you as our customer. And then if you ever do get into a collision, because we do a first notification of loss immediately through the AI and the digital device, your insurance company could call you up and say, Nick, I saw that you just got into a collision. We're sending a tow truck. Do you need an
Yeah,
ambulance? We're here for you. Right? Imagine that kind of. I mean, it's more like your mom calling saying, "Are you okay?" Well,
completely. And I'll end the interview with this. Your This is the AI that we've all hoped for, right? This isn't that scary AI. This isn't the AI that's going to steal your job. This isn't the AI that's going to write, get you a diploma by writing your term papers, and now you have to sort of wonder. This is literally the AI that is a supplement, which is for the AI podcast for Risk and Robots. It is what we have been promoting, which is the future is human plus AI. That human plus
yes,
AI is greater than human, greater than AI.
I think that's absolutely critical, Nick. It's human plus AI as opposed to trying to replace. AI is great at some things, like AI doesn't fall asleep, doesn't get bored. Humans are really good at complex interactions, judgments, dealing with other people. So you want both. The other thing I would say is, AI is best when it's preventative, not punitive, right? So that's why you want to look 5 seconds into the future, not at how did you drive last week, and I'm going to ding you for it. That people experience that very negatively if you ding them for something that's done in the past. They want to have the help for how to get better.
It's one of the reasons why they don't want telematics in their
Of
personal
course,
auto, because they don't want to be
yeah,
lectured to. It's like, I know I'm going 90. Like,
that's right.
don't shut up, ma. leave,
Yeah, there's
leave
there's
me
two problems
alone.
with the telematics. One is they don't want to be lectured, but the other is, as we talked earlier, and maybe not 90, but going 80 may not be risky at all, right? If you're doing it in rural Montana or even out here in California, Interstate 280 at 11 at night. I used to drive home from San Francisco to Silicon Valley, and there's nobody on the highway, right? So, you want to get home, you want to get to bed. Um, and if you have that situational awareness, it becomes a much friendlier system. And so
Yeah,
embedding AI in the human context is really critical.
yeah. It's something I would not have even thought about until this particular conversation. That and if the traffic's going fast, you should go fast, right? Like intuitively, we all know that, but legally, from a regulatory standpoint, like who's going to sign off on something like that? It's uncomfortable to do that, but it makes complete sense. And this has been a complete eye opening conversation, and so really congratulations with Nauto and these technologies that me as an insurance professional can sort of look at and say, this isn't like the typical technology. This is really life-saving, game-changing. This is you with insurance, Stefan, I'm constantly searching for that technology that you get that value proposition where it's like the technology creates so much value, it's a no-brainer. Like it's that 10x thing. Most technologies, like, yeah, it improves productivity. Yeah, it'll do this, but this seems like a real 10xer or more.
Yeah, it is, and I think there's one particular area that we haven't even touched on, which is to protect your kids. Learning to drive is one of the most dangerous things we do in
Mm.
life. And statistically, you'll have multiple collisions before you learn to drive. Um, as a teenager, when you start out at 16, typically. And so that's where I see parents getting hugely excited. Wow, this can help my teen. And every time I give a talk, we're only working with commercial fleets today, but every time I give a talk, I have at least 4 or 5 people come up and say, could I get one for my son or my daughter? And I definitely want to do that one day. We're
How
working
far
towards that
away?
with a couple of the. So the challenge right now is we don't have an efficient go-to-market mechanism to reach teenagers, and our sensor package is still pretty expensive. It's about $450 per vehicle. Now, there are definitely some parents who would say, hey, my teen
Yeah,
is worth $400. Let me do that.
completely.
But where we're headed is we're working with multiple automakers to build this technology in. And then you can literally just say, oh, I've got my car. My teen's going to drive it starting next week. Let me turn on the extra safety and coaching features. And two things happen, right? One is you as parent will feel safer because you actually know that your teen's going to have fewer collisions and be safer. But the other thing we found is the feedback drivers learn incredibly fast because we're surfacing the things that you didn't see. And so
Yeah,
your perception is honed. Oh, I didn't see that pedestrian. Oh my God. Yeah, I got to pay more attention there. And so you change your awareness of driving changes. I noticed that in myself. I had no idea how often I looked at my phone until I started driving with Nauto. And you learn to put it down and pay attention.
completely. I still classify collisions as like a low frequency, high severity type of thing, and humans are just naturally very bad at computing those kinds of probabilities and dealing with those things. And so in those particular scenarios, to me, as I've been like investigating AI, it's been like I think that's ultimately where society is going to benefit is the potential for simulation, the potential to get people potentially years of experience in a very short period of time is where like even without driving, I love the driving simulation. I had not even crossed my mind, but how do we train pilots? Right, simulation. How are we
Yeah,
training doctors now? Simulation. How should we be
yeah,
training children who are driving? Simulation. How should we be
yeah,
training sales professionals? Simulation. They can't get enough repetition. It takes them years to get that repetition. And humans are very good when they have repetition and they get the feedback and like you did this thing wrong. That's that human plus AI. It's like, wow, like, you know, our ability to get it make these massive advancements in solve these problems. It's like it's incredible that we're here. And so Stefan, thank you. Like thank you for coming on, but thank you for leaving that cozy McKinsey job and deciding to become an entrepreneur and building this out. Thank you very much.
it's been a definite change of pace and totally worth it. I think, Nick, one of the things I'm grateful for is you just gave me a unique way, I think, of framing what we do, which is we're distilling 3 billion miles worth of driving experience and about 30,000 collisions we've avoided, 8,000 collisions we've seen into a box that basically is your companion that gives you the edge of, none of us have had 3 billion miles of driving experience, right? Nobody drives that much. And it's there to protect you. So
Yep. Yep.
it gets me out of bed in the morning still after 8 years, and I'm excited. And it's great to see how you think about fitting this into the world of insurance.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.